Hello, and welcome to the Logistics Management Podcast Series. My name is Jeff Berman. I'm Group News Editor for Logistics Management, as well as the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group. Today, it's a real pleasure to welcome Kevin Huntsman to our podcast. Kevin is the President of Mastio Company, where he's dedicated the past 29 years to helping organizations better understand and improve their customer experience. Throughout his tenure, Kevin has led projects for hundreds of companies, including numerous Fortune 100 firms across diverse sectors such as energy, utilities, transportation, logistics, plastics, and chemicals. Under Kevin's leadership, Matsio Company has continued to strengthen its reputation for delivering actionable insights and impartial data. With more than 36 years of experience, the firm has completed more than 900 projects for more than 350 clients, empowering businesses to make data-driven decisions, enhancing performance and growth. Kevin oversees the full life cycle of each project, ensuring that every engagement meets the high standards of quality and integrity for which Matsio and Company is known. He earned his degree in marketing from Missouri Western State University. Kevin, welcome.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. The feeling's mutual. So, Kevin, for those listening that may not be familiar with Mastio, why don't you give us sort of an overview in terms of the company's objective or mission, your main services, offerings, customer verticals that you guys participate in, things along those lines.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity, Jeff. So Mastio has been in business, as Jeff mentioned, since 1989. So for 36 years, Mastio has been helping companies in various industries capture customer feedback. To really distill it down, I always tell people that Mastio is a lot like JD Power, Jeff,
Sure.
but we're on the business to business side only. In the industries where we're capturing feedback, obviously the audience today is most interested in the work that we do in the LTL sector, whether that's a US or Canada study, global freight,
Yep.
air and freight brokerage, customs brokerage. So really what we do, Jeff, is we interview companies' customers to capture feedback that centers around their performance in the market, typically around 25 to 30 different attributes, performance-related attributes that we measure. We also, for our clients, Jeff, capture how important those factors are, which allows the subscribers to a Mastio study to understand where should I allocate resources. And then in addition to that, a significant amount of effort is put into capturing what I'd call voice of the customer or voice of the shipper comments for the logistics industry. So we do all this research by telephone, which I think is important and unique because my team, I've got folks on our team that have been around over 30 years, myself 29 years, and really skilled, Jeff, at what I would say peeling back the onion and understanding that true perception of what shippers think of their carriers or custom brokers or US Canadian LTL carriers, et cetera.
Okay, terrific overview. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So the motor carrier rankings, and you had talked about less than truckload or LTL, obviously a core part of your service portfolio, especially for those of us in freight transportation, supply chain logistics. People pay close attention to the rankings, and I just was wondering, you know, in terms of the process or the object or the process slash objective, as well as how many people participate in the survey,
Sure.
which parts of the different sectors. I guess we can use LTL as sort of the benchmark here, Kevin.
Great, great. So in 2025, we conducted the 21st edition of the Mastio LTL study, Jeff.
Yeah.
We conducted 1,630 interviews with major shippers. Obviously, there are tens and thousands of shipments per day, hundreds of thousands of shipments per day across the US. Our focus is really capturing the majority of the freight that's moved. Jeff, we try to cover that vis-a-vis the SMB market, get a good cross-section of that market, as well as the national accounts and enterprise accounts, where we can get a good holistic view of shippers' perception. And then our carrier partners, so we have a significant number. We've been very fortunate and have grown this over the years, leverage this data, Jeff, to truly understand where do I have gaps as a carrier, and what strengths do I have? Where can I leverage those strengths? Where can I look at competitors where they have gaps and where I have a strength that I could potentially take business and grow, especially, Jeff, in a market today that is soft is probably not a strong enough word.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then, you talked about the voice of the shipper and obviously you're in tandem sort of with your work with the carriers. Um, so how do you sort of kind of collaborate with them, I guess, in terms of both for these rankings and also for Mastio efforts or initiatives separate from the rankings?
Sure, sure. So, really, from the voice of the shipper perspective, we are capturing the perception of the carriers that they use around questions around the biggest improvement they've made, what gaps do they have. We're also tracking, Jeff, just looking at what percentage of the respondents maybe ship to Mexico or use cross border services or use a 3PL or a broker and understand that. Also, do some top of mind work around the website, which carrier has the best website from a top of mind perspective, and rank that. It was interesting here in 2025, Estes was the number one ranked carrier when we look at website as use, or the top of mind website. They've invested heavily, as many shippers know.
Yeah.
And looking at also rankings around the net promoter score. So we talk about the Mastio rankings, the quality rankings, but we also look at that likelihood to recommend, Jeff. So a lot of the carriers there's carriers like Averett and Daylight and Old Dominion are some of the carriers that perform very high in
Yeah.
those metrics. And our carrier partners, they really leverage this data, Jeff, on a regional basis. So they'll take this data and we'll segment the data based on regions using zip codes. So what zips do they deliver to? So we're capturing that. So a lot of people like to talk more so about the rankings, which is just kind of like your GPA. But if you look
Yeah.
at the individual attributes, that's the key when you think about the work that we do.
Oh, absolutely. So in a sense, it's kind of like you guys can slice and dice or curtail the data in a way that it can give your customers or the carrier, whether it be carrier, shipper, whomever, a really detailed overview, a really inside the lane kind of look at how things are going, right?
Absolutely. And the data, you think about the different parts of the country, the customers think differently. If you're shipping in the upper Midwest or North Dakota, South Dakota, there's a much different perception of carriers and how they operate versus a more dense area like the Southeast. So
Yeah.
the ability to look at that data across those different segmentations. And we also look at it, Jeff, by size of shipper, what's the average weekly shipments? So we can segment there. We look at, as I mentioned, geographically, and we also leverage the NAICS codes for companies. So if you want to look at how you're perceived with the manufacturing group or different types of verticals within the U.S. as far as companies that ship LTL.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, so kind of more of like a granular question, I guess, Kevin. What are sort of some of the things that motor carriers and shippers are telling Massio sort of about the current state of the market? And I when I say market, I mean LTL in this case, really. And I'm talking about things like service and rates, things on those lines. Because when we previously spoke, you had noted that the sentiment of the shippers is obviously driven by economic conditions, but overall, they're pretty happy with their carriers, largely because they're in a good spot with pricing and excess capacity as well, which should drive good shipper rates. Does that thesis sort of remain intact at the
So
moment?
absolutely, absolutely. Just to give a little bit of an indicator of that, we track the average score for each attribute from year to year. And we found that in 2025, the average score for all but two of the attributes increased from 2024, Jeff. And that's a
Oh,
direct result. There's excess capacity, as you mentioned a moment ago. It's soft, and soft is probably not a strong enough word. So,
sure.
like I mentioned earlier, so a lot of the carriers are being very aggressive, but I will say that the carriers are being very disciplined too. Jeff, you and I have been at this game long enough. If we think back in 08, 09, it was almost a race to the bottom on
Yeah.
price. But this
Yeah.
time around, it really has held. And I think we've been in this freight recession, gosh, 2 or 3 years. And hopefully we come out of it soon. But the ability of the carriers to be disciplined, and obviously they've learned from past experiences with that, and still able to get some of the GRIs through. And really, I think the carriers look to the shippers as that collaborative partner. They both need to exist, and they both need to profit and grow, and they can't do it without one another, Jeff.
No, 100%. I mean, and that's probably, it seems to me, and maybe you see that in your feedback when you do your surveys and your rankings, especially for 2025, right? Which has been, by all accounts, a very uneven, uncertain, unpredictable year, whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely.
Um, Someone asked me the other day, so it's been a pretty crazy year. I said, yeah, I'd tell you that I think 2026 would be different, but in many ways, it's probably going to mirror what we're currently our current environment. But without a crystal ball, I don't want to get too far ahead of what the future may hold.
Sure, sure. Everybody tells us next quarter is better, but I'm
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly how many quarters they've been telling us that, Jeff.
yeah, I know. To borrow a football phrase, and I know that you are a big Chiefs fan.
Yes, sir.
I feel like they keep. I feel like the goalposts keep get moved, getting moved.
Yeah, it's kind of like economists are kind of like weathermen. They can say what they think and tell us what's going to happen, but if it doesn't happen, they don't get in trouble or don't lose their job.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So when we look at the rankings, Kevin, I am curious, and I think it would be very informative for our listeners. Um, Sort of what other supply chain focused sectors does Mastio do rankings for? And I guess as a follow-up, what have been consistent findings and takeaways for those sectors that you guys have seen over the years?
Yeah, I think first off, we do it for US LTL. We do it for Canadian LTL, Jeff. We also do a global air and ocean freight study. We've done a truckload study, but it's been some time ago since we last conducted that. We
Okay.
also do some work in customs brokerage. We are targeting 2026 for a more 3PL slash broker focused study that we haven't done before. There's been a lot of demand, but we think we're definitely in a position in 2026 to do that. And a couple of times we've done work on a multi-client level, like the LTL study for the ports, Jeff. And
Ah,
the challenges there, it's something that I've had, as a matter of fact, I've had a few calls here recently from some major ports that have worked with us in the past asking when we're going to do that again. And we did it right before COVID the last time. And obviously there was a massive challenge for ports during that time. And we think it may be time to do it again. But as we look at the data, it's interesting the consistency really first off what's important to the shipper. I mean the base, the fundamentals, Jeff. You pick it up on time, you deliver it on time, you don't break it. And one of the things that we've seen increased importance in is the trustworthiness of the carrier. And I think that's somewhat a result of the fallout from Yellow
yeah,
bankruptcy. But really, these shippers are looking to these carriers to be a solutions provider, to be an advocate for them, and to help them become more effective. I talk a lot about to clients, Jeff, that 10, 12 years ago, most of the logistics decisions really stopped at a mid-level decision making process within the organization. But given the importance of logistics within these shipper companies, it's moved up to the C-suite oftentimes,
absolutely.
where those C-suite individuals, whether it's a COO or a CFO, it's different than it used to be. And the criteria with that have changed as well. And I'll call out one specific attribute I think is very important, but doesn't get a lot of press, is billing accuracy. When you're a shipper, does the quote match the invoice? And I always talk about, Jeff, how can the carrier create less friction in the relationship? And when you have an inaccurate bill, that's friction. And
Yeah.
shippers, I always tell carriers, Jeff, shippers want to pay you. Okay, they want to pay you as fast as they can,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
when there's challenges with invoices and billing accuracy, they can't, and then that's friction, and that causes challenges in the relationship.
No, no question about it. And you had just talked about the whole trust aspect or trustworthiness aspect. I mean, I've been covering freight transportation and logistics for a while now, and they're more than just buzzwords, right? And I'm certain that's reflected in your findings, in your raw data, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you come across shipper carrier collaboration, visibility,
Yes,
transparency, honesty, all these things
absolutely.
that make for or really are honestly prerequisites for a successful relationship. I know that sometimes people say, "Oh man, we've heard this 100 times. We know all this stuff," but it really can't be reiterated, right?
I agree.
Reiterated enough. I mean,
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's the if you've got a few different carriers and at the end of the day they've got assets, they've got tractors, trucks, terminals, drivers, etc. But the difference I've seen in a lot of companies is the culture, Jeff, the
yeah.
culture of the organization, and that culture is driven not just at the top, but all the way to the driver.
Oh
At the
yeah.
end of the day, the driver, I always tell carriers, Jeff, that the driver is that company because that's who they see every day or every other day. And that relationship that the driver creates with the shipper can be as important as the one that the account executive has with that carrier as well. And when those two can work in tandem with one another, they create a very sticky relationship with the carrier. And it proves out. We ask a question: have you switched or moved volume in the last 12 months? And about 66% said no, we haven't.
Well,
And
that's
then
pretty
for
telling. That
it,
speaks to the strength of a good relationship, right?
it does. And I'll take it another notch higher there, Jeff. For those that say no, we ask, is this something you're looking to do in the next 12 months? And 92% said no. So people are
Okay.
creatures of habit. We like to do business with people we know and like, and therefore I tell the carriers don't give shippers a reason to leave. So from a business retention perspective, that's great. But if you're the hunter out there trying to develop business, it's a little more challenging. So you've got to have a compelling value proposition when you go see these shippers.
Okay, got it. Interesting. And I mean, with the this is something that the market depends on. They value the rankings. It stands to reason. And I guess I'm addressing this from sort of a respondent perspective. Do you see the number of respondents uh for these types of things? Like, and again, I'll harp back to LTL because that's sort of the basis of our conversation. You said you had 1,630 respondents. I
Yep.
guess what I'm trying to ask, Kevin, is was that an increase over the prior year? And does that number tend to stay consistent, or do you see increases in it every year?
We keep it pretty consistent, Jeff. And part of the function of that, I think, to some degree, is there's so much merger and acquisition activity behind the scenes across
Yeah.
the country with companies that don't have that next generation that want to own the company. So a lot of divestitures there. And
Yeah.
I think we keep it very consistent, and people are very willing to help us because they do see that carriers are leveraging this data to improve. They talk about it. We
Yeah.
also do, Jeff, send a brief overview of the study results just as a thank you to the respondents. And that's always something they're very excited to receive. So we think we have a very good relationship with the people. I tell people this very simply, Jeff. We exist at the kindness of others. We exist because people take their time to give us feedback. We in turn take that feedback and package it for the carriers so that they can provide better offerings, better solutions, and improve that shipper experience.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. Um, Looking at sort of supply chain, freight transportation, and logistics from more of a broader view, but also from an LTL view too, Kevin. I guess I'll separate it into maybe two mini questions. Um, One would be sort of what do you see as sort of the biggest supply chain issues at the moment? And obviously that can have an LTL slant. And then as a part two, um, things that you guys are keeping a close eye on in 2026. I mean, AI, tariffs, things like that always are top of mind for a lot of people. So if those are part of it, so that's great. But I'd just like to hear your perspective on those things.
Yeah, I think, and they'll kind of overlap a little bit, Jeff, as we see some of the supply chain issues today. It's very economically driven, and I think it's also driven from the Fed. Is I think you always hear the term there's dry powder available, and I do think there is. But as we operate in an uncertain environment, it's hard to make decisions where I want to invest. So I think carriers are sitting on the sidelines a bit. I think as you look at 2025, one of the big developments was the NMFC classification changes, and I've asked a lot of shippers, a lot of carriers. I kind of equate that NMFC thing to Y2K. Jeff, you and I have
Sure.
been around long enough to remember that. We're about the same age.
Yep.
We
Yep.
thought, holy crap, the world's going to end. And guess what? It didn't. And when the NMFC classifications came in, I think the carriers did a great job of educating up front and informing shippers of those changes. So I don't want to say it's been a non-event, but it hasn't been what I think it was portrayed to be for
Sure.
2025. Now, when we look into 2026, there's a couple things we're watching. One of the big things, Jeff, is the FedEx Freight SpinCo.
Yes.
As they, at some point here in the next 5-6 months, spin that company off, that's going to be very interesting. I do think that FedEx Freight is as a standalone entity, is a very, very strong competitor. I do think it'll take a little bit of time to get their footing, if you will. But I do think as time moves forward, they're they're a great carrier, they're a great competitor, and I think if they're unlinked from package, it definitely changes the landscape from a competitive perspective on that. I do think too, the economy as we roll into 2026 is what I hear is just to harken back to so far this year and probably last year, and in your great analogy of the goalposts continue to move. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
I think the other question, it's amazing. I'd love to listen to. I listen to a lot of earnings calls, but even in the industry, how many times the term AI comes up, and it's how can carriers leverage this type of technology to be more efficient. I tell people a lot of times, I don't know that AI will take a lot of people's jobs, but I think if you don't know how to use AI, someone else is going to take your job. And
Yeah.
we see that being some of the key themes as we roll into 2026.
Yeah. No, very, very valid points. It's sure to be another year full of I don't want to say surprises, but a year that is sure to keep everyone on their collective toes
Yes.
to say the least. And when we get there, we'll all get through it and we'll all see what happens. But Kevin, this has been great. On behalf of Logistics Management Magazine and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, I'd just like to say thanks for spending some time with us today.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. You guys do great work. Thanks for the opportunity, and let's do it again next year.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. And for those of you on LinkedIn, please be sure to check Kevin out. It's Kevin Huntsman, Huntsman. And also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Mastio, they have a really nice website. And check that out, www.mastio.com. And also, please go ahead and feel free to follow Logistics Management on Twitter. It's pretty easy, just at Logistics MGMT. And also, please, by all means, go ahead and sign up for our podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just punch in the Logistics Management podcast, and it will come right up. And Kevin, but before we go, I know we had mentioned football. You're a big Chiefs fan.
I
Uh,
am.
a tough way to end last season, but getting there is half the battle in a way. A weird beginning to the year for the Chiefs. How you liking things? How do you? What's your forecast here?
That's a good question. We talk about seeing around corners and having a crystal ball. I know they play the Broncos this weekend and at Denver. So it's logistics is a bit like football. When the game starts, you never know what's going to happen, and I mean logistics, we never know what's going to happen next tomorrow, next week, next month. So I
Yeah,
I mean the fan in me says, my gosh, they're going to be in the Super Bowl again, but the logical thought process in me says it's going to be very challenging. So
yeah,
we'll
no,
see.
no, yeah. It's going to be interesting.
It is, and I know where you're at. Obviously, the New England Patriots seem to be making a comeback, so there's a lot more competition with New England and Indianapolis, and it's the landscape's changing a bit.
Yes, yes. Well, as a resident of New England, I'm sadly a Giants fan, but I'll
Oh,
just leave
I'm
it at
sorry.
that. But I will
Yeah,
say, I will say that the Pats are playing quite well. So,
they are. They
yeah,
are.
yeah. All right. Well, look, this has been great, Kevin. Thanks again for your time, and for those of you in the audience, thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next time. Have a great day, everyone.